Hi, welcome to DevCentral. Today we have a distinguished guest with us. Before we get to him, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Jason Rama. Been with the DevCentral team for a while, and this week, John, we have John Wagon with us as well. John, how you doing?
Hey, doing great. Anytime David Holmes and Jason Rom are in the same Skype chat, I just show up, And now that we got Jim, we got others here, it's even better. So good to be here.
All right, and David Holmes, you're back with us the second week in a row.
I can't get enough of you guys. I love your podcast.
Yeah. Awesome.
Good deal. All right, so today we have a distinguished guest with us, Jim Manico. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I actually met you. It's been a few years. I'm sure you don't remember me, but we met in London at one of F5's agility events, and we were on one of the. I guess it was the closing party booze cruise. Is what it was. But we were on the Thames making our way around London, and you sat down, introduced yourself, and we just had a great conversation about security, and your passion for security in general was very clear. And so, we had this opportunity for our second week in our security month to talk about OWASP, and I'd remembered that you had been talking about that, and we're very passionate about that. And of course, you're on the global board of directors for OWASP as well. So we wanted to invite you to have a conversation with us about what OWASP is and what its goals are and how you fit into that fold. So you want to take just a minute to introduce yourself and then kind of talk about your history with OWASP?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say I'm a big supporter of any effort that helps developers write secure code. They need help. It's a really difficult problem. So I really like what you're doing here at DevCentral, regardless of why I think it's a good thing, because anything that can bring awareness to developers to help them write secure code is going to help secure the global infrastructure and regarding a problem that's really, really difficult to solve. So, hey, hats off to all of you for being a part of DevCentral. My name is Jim Manico. I'm one of the global board members of the OWASP Foundation. 2008, I started just sending in questions and debate questions to different members of OWASP back in one of its early versions of OWASP, and I just kind of got drawn into it. As a developer, I realized the need for security because of lots of the contract coding I was doing at the time back in the late 2000s. It was a difficult problem. OWASP was one of the only groups talking about it, so I just kept asking a lot of questions. And admittedly, back in like 2008, my questions were very novice, very foolish at times. But I hopefully only ask a bad question once, and over time, I became a little knowledgeable, a little more knowledgeable. I just kept studying. It's almost, I started my study in depthly back in 2008 with OWASP, and 3 years ago, I had worked on several projects and cared about the organization enough to run for the global board. I was elected as one of the board members, was reelected last year, and I'm serving my final term now as the global board member. It's a stressful position. A lot of the most difficult challenges around running the organization fall into my lap and the lap of the other board members. So this will be my last year on the board. I think 4 years is a good term, right? But I really believe in an OWASP mission. The last thought of this speech. OWASP is, of course, the Open Web Application Security Project. Our mission is to make application security visible so that people and organizations can make informed decisions about application security risk. All of our materials are under a free and open source license. Everybody is welcome to participate. And I feel like it's a noble mission. We're people, we make mistakes. All kinds of influences enter into OWASP. But I think at its heart, just trying to do open source work to spread awareness about a difficult security topic, that's a very noble core, and it's something I strongly believe in. As we all know, trying to get developers to write secure code or just deal with application security, it's a brutally difficult challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. So with the OWASP Top 10, this list gets released like every 3 years. What goes into the development of that?
Now, the OWASP Top 10 it's not a project that I run, so and I'm not even I watch the list and try to add intelligent feedback. It's not one of the projects I'm a main contributor of. But way back in the day, Alan Poller started top 10s at SANS talking about security, more traditional network security issues. And then many years ago with the very first OWASP Top 10, Jeff Williams and Dave Wickers and other team members did a Top 10 for application security risk. And it's been picked up not just as a resource, it's been picked up as a standard in many ways, which I think is a really bad decision by the community. OWASP Top 10, by the author's own admission, is meant to be a general awareness document to start the conversation. It's not something to standardize a program on or a product on or anything on. It's just meant to be an initial read, and it's a good initial read, but using it again for a standard, I think, is problematic. At OWASP, if you're looking for documents that are more of a standard, I would look at the OWASP Application Security Verification Standard 3.0. That's more of like, up around 200 individual granular requirements that a developer can use to add security requirements to their project. That's a great project for a detailed standard, which I would love to see PCI and HIPAA and all the other legislation bodies and compliance documents, or just legal rules to do business with me. In the case of PCI, I'd love to see all them move away from the OWASP Top 10 and cite the ASVS 3.0 document, which is really more closer to a standard. But let me not minimize the importance of the OWASP Top 10. No other document, no other document besides the OWASP Top 10 has done more to spread awareness about web security and application security. So I do think it's an important document. I just want to make sure it's used properly for why it was created, to spread some awareness, not to standardize your program on. You think is that fair? Is that fair, you think? Or
yeah. Hey Jim, this is John. That's a great insight. And frankly, I was not as aware of the ASVS 3.0, so that's good for me and maybe others that would listen to this to know about that. But like you said, the top 10 is kind of this de facto standard that a lot of people use. And so based on what you were saying, I've always had this question of how does that get developed? Is it a bunch of guys that just kind of, search applications for various vulnerabilities and then they send them in, and then I have no idea how that list gets developed. Can you give some insight into that?
The list of how the list gets developed evolves over time. Again, this is Jeff Williams and Dave Wickers' project primarily. They're the gentlemen who started the OWASP Top 10. And frankly, they also started the ASVS project, the earlier versions of it. So these gentlemen did a lot of the original OWASP documents. And they grabbed vulnerability data from members of the community, different security companies, aggregated that data, and then made a call. I would say earlier on in this project, there are more gut checks. And as the project matures, there's a new release every 2 or 3 years. It opened up the process more to make it more data driven. So I know last year there was a direct request from data from members of the application security community. Now this year is going to be more of an open call for data for the OWASP Top 10. I just saw that posted to the list a few days ago. So I think as the process for the next OWASP Top 10 matures, we'll see an even more open call for data from bug bounty programs, security vendors, anybody who wants to submit vulnerability data so we can pick the best top 10.
Cool. Hey, great insight. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Good stuff. Hey, I've also noticed that and not to keep hitting this top 10, especially now that we know it should not be used for standards, for corporations. But it's interesting that it seems like the same vulnerabilities just keep popping up on that thing over and over. Can you give some insight into why you think that might be true, and maybe some things that we as a community can help with to maybe change that?
The data, depending on how you look at it, says different things, but I really think things are getting better, that more companies care about application security. Vulnerabilities like SQL injection, while injection is still one of the number one issues on the OWASP Top 10, among people I work with, it's becoming less of an issue. It's something they've solved, at least from a big company point of view, a couple of years ago. And so, but by the same token, maybe if we look at every single app on the planet, SQL injection is still a prolific problem.
Yeah.
Why is SQL injection still an issue today? And it is. It's a big problem today still. That's a really good question, because the technique to fix it, query parameterization, is a very simple coding technique. And it's something that's doable even by a novice developer. Yet we still have people who don't build in that defense, or are using SQL in ways that you can't parameterize, or have extremely legacy systems before parameterized APIs came out. They try to fix that problem with more of a validation strategy, which is a bit more challenging. There's a lot of reasons why these older bugs still pop up. Let's move to cross-site scripting. I have a good reason why cross-site scripting still pops up today, and probably will in 10 years. Because the web is built for cross-site scripting, right? When I build a web page from different sources and integrating content from different web services, or different content that's directly rendered, or different content that's submitted by different users, I mash that all up into the same page. And if any one of those fragments has evil JavaScript in it, it's going to execute. And the browser has no way to differentiate, for the most part, between good and bad JavaScript. So just that the web standards that we use to build a web page don't really account for cross-site scripting. And standards that did, like old school Xforms, it was in competition for HTML5. I just got a bug submission canceled from Mozilla today. I used to submit a lot of bugs about Xforms when it was a competing standard, and they shut all those bugs down because Xforms is dead. It requires too much robust work to make it work, so it failed in the standard. And HTML5 had just more web forms, open kind of content creation, which is very vulnerable to cross-site scripting based on how many people assemble web pages. So we're going to be stuck with this for some time to come. And the combination of secure coding, other preventative measures, basically those who really want to stop this kind of risk and have the bucks to do it, and they're managing giant financial risks. The customers that I see that do the best are the ones who throw the kitchen sink at it and more. Let's throw every scanner, every SaaS. Yeah, let's put a firewall up too, and let's do everything we possibly can to try to manage this risk. Architectural review, coding standards, everything and more. Those are the only people I see who are really successful when it comes to AppSec.
Yeah. So since you mentioned query parameterization on SQL, just from from that persona of novice web developer, a couple weeks ago, actually it's been a couple months now, my son's robotics team has asked me to build a web app for them to be able to do their advanced scouting at competitions.
Oh, you're a good man.
And I said, well, I'm not a web developer, but I'll take a shot. And so I know Python a little, and so I thought, well, I'll pick this Flask micro framework, and then it has some plugins for like WT forms for form management. And so as a novice web developer gets into this, and on the application delivery side, I understand the security risks inherent with web applications, but on the developer side, I do not have the skills to even recognize where my flaws are, yet I can go pen test it and say, okay, there's where my flaws are on the network side of it. But on the app side, it's like I don't even know where to start. So just from the standpoint of frameworks and plugins for frameworks, is there like a stack rank place people can go to find information like this, to say, hey, this is a good framework, this is a bad framework? Because there's all kinds of information there about a lot of things, but in that aspect of frameworks, it's very hard to find good information about that.
I agree. And I want to touch upon a couple points. As a developer who just wants basic awareness around what secure coding is, I recommend they go and start by reading the OWASP Top 10 Proactive Control document, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So, and that's a real high-level document, talks about the major security areas we have to be concerned with. If a developer hasn't read that, or at least has that basic knowledge, we can't even have a conversation with that developer about application security, and we're done. Now, the next step, though, let's suppose you're a novice developer, you want to build a website with today's frameworks as best you can and provide security without the knowledge. Then here's some real basic ideas to consider. Whatever framework you use, like WordPress or whatnot, or whatever, keep to the basic framework and keep it up to date. Be like sign to the security list of that framework, or somehow track that framework so when it's available to be updated, you could do that immediately. Johnny on the spot, immediately update that framework. That's phase one. Phase number two, or decision number two, don't use a lot of third-party components of that framework. Like if you're using the core of WordPress and you want to build something that's not going to be hacked, stick to that core and keep it up to date. It's the third-party ecosystem of many of these frameworks that really end up biting us. And frankly, there's two different kinds of framework in my mind. There's a framework like WordPress, which is meant to build an entire website. Then there's a framework like Spring or Spring Security, which is more of a low-level framework to build more of a website from scratch, from code. Where WordPress, I don't even need to be a coder to use many aspects of it. I can administer my way and click and drag my way to having a website done without doing a lot of low-level coding. But either of those frameworks need to be heavily updated and heavily vetted before you use them. And if it's a popular, well-used framework, I think you're more likely to get security in the core than one that's no longer being updated, or one that's brand new and still before its production release. There's a few basic things that you can do to, even as a novice developer, to go down a more secure path.
Good deal. Thank you. It's good.
I had that same question, Jason, so I'm glad that you asked that. Hey, Jim, what are you going to do next? If you're going to step down from the global director position? What's next for Jim Manico?
Well, and not so much stepping down. I'm going to finish my term, and I'm going to, in the last year, be as active as I can and still participate, go to my meetings, be a part of the leadership community. I'm taking my last year seriously. But after the end of the year, I'm just going to focus on technical projects. There's a lot of things I want to do at OWASP, just helping out with different projects that I don't have time for. And once I'm on the board, I can just go back to being another participant in OWASP, trying to spread awareness around application security in some way.
Awesome. Hey, you also, you're an instructor, right, Jim? Are you still going to do that, like secure coding, instruct class, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's my profession, right? I'm the owner and a one-man shop running Manicode Security, little play off my last name, right? And I'm keeping it small. I'm not trying to grow. I'm just trying to train as many developers as I can, and I absolutely love doing it. It's something that is so much fun. It's it's like a theatrical performance for me, as well as a scientific study and research endeavor as well. I love putting those two things together. So it's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, good deal. So within the OWASP vulnerabilities, is there any one particular one that's more like low-hanging fruit that the script kiddies can do that is a super easy fix? We talked about the SQL injection and the being pretty much solved in the big finances, and cross-site scripting is kind of a larger complex problem to solve. But is there one in there that is a low-hanging fruit that anybody can just knock out if they take 2 seconds to be concerned about it?
That's a fair question. And hey, before I continue, let me just take one quick step back. Sometimes when people ask questions about OWASP and about my personal business, I just always like to say OWASP does not endorse anything I do professionally. My work at OWASP, I'm a nonprofit, charitable contributor. And then my professional job is a whole separate thing. So, it's something that I also believe in strongly, that we want to keep OWASP free of commercial influences, to be vendor neutral, just to be a objective research body and not be tied to any specific solution or service. And that goes for mine as well, regardless of me being a board member. So I just want to put that out there just to keep my integrity in check as we have this conversation. So nice. I'm looking at the OWASP top 10. You're basically asking which one of these is going to be easy to fix. And I really think A9 is the big one, right? A9 is the whole idea about using components with known vulnerabilities. And we just talked about this. And we can move to another one in a second. But one of the OWASP tools for the Java ecosystem is called the OWASP Dependency Check. This is one of the directors of a major top bank who's a OWASP contributor and open sourced this solution and continues working on it. I watch his check-ins. This is Jeremy Long, who's submitting check-ins to Dependency Check every day. He likes to code early in the morning before work. What a trooper. And this competes with several commercial solutions. This basically scans your Java code base, and .NET support as well is coming up, and it finds third-party libraries that you're using that have public CVEs report against them that are known to be vulnerable to make it easy to update. This is a really easy way to check a Java app if you're using insecure third-party libraries without really heavy lifting of fixing your code. It's like swapping out libraries and testing. It's not so bad. Let's do another one. Let's go down to A10, unvalidated redirects and forwards, right? If an attacker can taint a URL primarily with a URL, with another URL fragment to his site, and then the attacker can use that URL that's really a URL. It looks like it's a URL to your site, but when someone hits it, it redirects them elsewhere. It can be used for phishing or push them to malware sites. And that's a matter of validating your variables that do redirection, so they're limited by a certain domain or limited by a certain set of rules around that. It's sometimes a little tricky to validate parameters for URLs, but it's not that bad. And just making sure that your parameters that cause a redirect are limited to good locations, you'll stop A10 in the OWASP top 10. You'll stop unvalidated redirects and forwards.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's transition now over to the proactive controls. So we've talked about the vulnerabilities, and certainly web application firewalls like our ASM exist because all those vulnerabilities are out there. So there's a market play for being able to mitigate those vulnerabilities. But what the proactive controls are set up to do is to not eliminate the need for a web application firewall, but certainly to do the due diligence to protect the app as much as possible, and so that everybody under the sun in the organization isn't sticking a thumb in a leak in the boat. So you want to talk to us a little bit about the proactive controls and the approach from that, and some of the things that developers can do to eliminate a lot of this vulnerability.
Gotcha. And maybe you can help me out before we do that. Can we have a moment of web application firewall confessions? Can you hold? I was going
to ask for that, Jim. This is John. Yeah, I was going to ask for your thoughts on that. You said a minute ago that the successful people are the ones that throw the kitchen sink at everything, right?
Exactly.
They use it all. So
you got to use them. And we like successful people.
We do.
I like my customer base especially. I like the customer base that pays me to train. I especially like them not getting hacked, so we can continue training so they can continue being in business and being happy. So anyways, that's a little mercenary, but okay, web application firewall confessions. I always just like to badmouth web application firewall and say web application firewalls are bad. They're for wimps. Don't use them. And that's all I would basically say for many years. And as a secure coding educator and a purist, that's a real good academic place to be. Encourage people to fix their code. Now, That's a good academic position, but I've had this experience the last 3 years called being in the real world, trying to protect giant websites that generate sometimes billions of dollars of income, and debating between developer resources and legacy code and the risk that we have in play and the need for security teams to get more visibility into the app. And always end up using a firewall in some way for senior teams, and a lot of different ways to deploy them. But I just see every big team with high risk applications, they have some kind of firewall, web application firewall technology somewhere for a variety of different purposes, from blocking to monitoring to both, depending on what they're trying to accomplish. So my confession is I do believe now that web application firewall is a fundamental part of an application security initiative. And my confession is I've been saying bad things about WASP for many years, and I've come to seek redemption and healing from that time in my life. It was a dark time.
Yeah, it sounds dark, Jim, but welcome to the other side, and we fully forgive.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Well,
it.
you know, I
We
think
welcome with open arms. That's
I
right.
think too, also, you know, it's like a functional problem, right? It's not even a security problem, but a functional problem. You have an opportunity to within the application delivery infrastructure. I can solve a functional problem now, and then the developers within their lifecycle program can fix the problem, and then I can pull it out of my application delivery infrastructure. I think the same thing applies here. The web application firewall, you know, is in place to protect those things that the app itself cannot protect yet. And then when it can, then you pull that out of your infrastructure. There's some things where it makes sense to always leave in the infrastructure, but the things that don't make sense to be there, certainly fix it in the app, pull it out, and then let the app do its due diligence.
And just in relation to your company as well, I have several big customers who depend upon F5 for a variety of things. And the most common answer I got for using WAFs was, we already have really expensive value. Let me use a different word. We already have very valuable F5 hardware in place, you know, for our infrastructure. Adding ASM is a no-brainer for us. And we know some use it for a little. They use it a little more and more over time as they get comfortable with it. But again, for a lot of people, I've heard this repeatedly. I already have the hardware in place. Using their firewall product in addition to that is a no-brainer and easy to do. So that's what I've heard.
Those are some great confessions. I
Really, yeah.
Part
I
of
feel
my
like we're in a
soul has been
taxi
healed.
cab. There was a taxi cab show, right? Now this is Skype call with Jim Manico.
I have no business affiliation with F5. I have zero affiliation or attachment to you in any way. This is, you know, as much as I can, my objective thoughts on this subject. But
no, hey, we appreciate it. That's what we want. That's what we want, Jim. We appreciate it.
So let's get proactive. We still want to at least talk about and strategize writing secure code. When we look at the OWASP proactive controls, it's a comment and supplement to the OWASP top 10. It's also meant to be an awareness document. It's not a complete standard. These are things to read before you really invest in ASVS for your company. And here's the top 10. Number 1, verify for security early and often. As much as the developers can own that, moving towards DevOps, adding automation into their build process, making sure that it's not some other pen tester over there who's assessing our application, but it's a part of what we as developers care about, help, support, and analyze as well, because we don't want any security bugs in our software. That's number 1, just an easy concept. Verify for security early and often. Number 2, it's a whole different level. Parameterize queries. This is a very specific low-level technique in code to stop SQL injection. But SQL injection is like a locust plague on your application. It's such a dangerous vulnerability. Lose all data, modify any data, or run system-level commands through different query functions. And it's such a big problem. We want one thing on the list to be extremely specific. Going on to 3, encode data. This is a general coding defense to stop injection class problems, as well as one of the main defense that you want to stop cross-site scripting, which is a form of injection in the browser. Now, parameterized query stops SQL injection. That requires a special defense. Most other forms of injection, like command injection and LDAP injection and XPath injection, those are mostly solved by the escaping of data, so they're no longer commands. So it's just data in the context of that query language. Number 4, input validation. We just want to validate all inputs with the good validation rule. Many of your products allow developers to do that at the firewall level on individual inputs. Developers can do it in code. I don't care where it's done. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But defining rules for individual inputs is just the fundamental core of all secure coding. It doesn't solve these problems, but it does limit the attack surface. So that's 4 so far. You want to keep going?
Absolutely. Give it to us.
Number 5 is a super high-level topic, right? Implement identity and authentication controls. This is, again, hundreds of different requirements just to build a basic login and session management mechanism in an application. So this just calls to that. And there's a lot of secondary topics like password storage and using SAML for federation. It's a complex topic that we have 5 or 6 cheat sheets to dig deeper into that topic. Number 6 is implement appropriate access controls, especially when you're moving into portals with lots of different customers using your software, or maybe you're building a web application that you're going to sell as a product to different folks. One does not just roll out access control. That's a Game of Thrones meme, right? So you don't just throw out access control. You have to really plan for it and understand what you're trying to accomplish, and before you just roll it out. Like a lot of people do role-based access control. We probably want to move most folks to a claims-based model, which requires, unfortunately, a lot of development. You can't just grab a third-party library or some solution from some big enterprise play and get access control. It's like the nervous system of your app. So I really try to encourage people to plan ahead for that. Same with identity and authentication, for that matter. Number 7 is protect data, right? We have data at storage and data at rest and data in transit. You know, it's something that your products do very well. You guys handle HTTPS at a lot of different tiers within the infrastructure, right? And so one of the things that I preach HTTPS on everything. One of the big calls today is HTTPS on every app. I don't think that's strong enough. Well-configured, well-tuned HTTPS on every app anytime you're sending sensitive data. So using encryption between your load balancer and your database server, between your web server and your database, between internal components, all of that being HTTPS, I think that's the next generation of what we all should be doing. I see a lot of big companies that have good encryption in transit between the user and their endpoints, and everything is plain text internal. And I think that era is over. A lot of people use the term, yeah, but that's our trust zone, man. It's our trust zone. You know what a trust zone is? A trust zone is a fancy word security architects use to say, we don't have to bother with good security practices there. It's a bad word to me.
Exactly.
It's a little snarky. Yeah. Number 8, implement logging and intrusion detection. There's so many things that attackers do that we should be aware of before it actually causes damage. There's a space of RASP and real-time application protection, which I find to be an interesting category as well. I also like when you're doing logging, don't just slap up some logging calls. Work with your incident response team to make sure you're logging the right stuff. That doesn't happen enough. It happens once in a while. When your development team and your monitoring team or your incident response team work together to do logging and application, it's many factors more powerful. Number 8, leverage security frameworks and libraries. This is just about using third-party components that give you good security. Keep them up to date. Don't rewrite controls from scratch. Leverage the good stuff in your frameworks. And to your point, it's difficult to analyze a framework to understand what's good and what's not good about it. That's a ridiculously difficult problem that a lot of people are chasing right now. And last but not least, error and exception handling. It's not super exciting, but it is still an important part of defensive coding. It's critical to making a system reliable and secure. We want error states are going to happen. We want to handle them in secure ways. So this is still a critical area of secure coding. So again, this document is not meant to boil the ocean. It's meant to be something you can print out, hand to a developer who's new at security, and get them started in understanding where they have to prioritize their time and where they have to focus on to build secure software.
Great, thank you.
That was excellent. I really like the point about having your logging team and the monitoring team talk with each other, because it makes so much sense as having been on the development side about, you think you're putting out like a really good error message, but in reality it gets ignored. And if it had just been a little bit different, or if it had just included this one extra piece of information, then it could have been, as you said, orders of magnitude more powerful. So that's a great suggestion, one that I hadn't thought of before.
And David, I always used to deal with logging by just logging every line of code in excruciating detail. I am a verbose person by nature. I code same way. Hungarian notation in my variables, log every line of code. Then they came back and said, yeah, you can stop doing that now. And that triggered a better conversation.
Right. Yeah, there's ways to make people do what you want them to do. Fantastic.
Hey, I had a if you don't mind, I had a question about I joined the OWASP a few years ago as a contributor, and every now and then I'll run into people who are they have their local OWASP chapter, and I wonder if you ever spend time with those chapters and how are those going, and what do you think makes a good local chapter of OWASP?
This is one of the hearts of OWASP. This is where communities gather around the world to talk about application security, and I've over the last couple of years, I've traveled to most chapters and gave a talk there and checked them out and see how they were doing. And I don't think it's OWASP's job to put a very heavy hand on that group. If we have a chapter that's representing the brand properly, setting up meetings and bringing in good speakers about application security, then they're doing a great job. We do have a chapter handbook that defines how to run a chapter properly. We have a full-time OWASP employee who manages our chapters and chapter relationships. There's a lot of mentors who can help you with the chapter. And the real rule, if you're going to run a chapter or looking to start one, just be a good person. Don't use it primarily as an advertising vehicle. Just go to OWASP, do the right thing, help out in some way, push the ball down the field. And people naturally want to do business with you. Be the good guy, be the good gal, be the good supporter of the community. Again, it just kind of attracts good things to you. That's what I try to tell people, right? And you get a bunch of folks together to talk about application security. We tend to be a very passionate community. There's a lot of things to discuss. It's very complex of a topic. So, get a bunch of smart people together to chat about application security. Good things usually happen because of it. So I'm very proud of the OWASP chapters and the commitment they've made to keep the discussion alive around the world.
So if somebody is starting a new chapter of OWASP in their region, what support does the OWASP organization provide to them for getting their chapter off the ground?
Yeah, we'll seed any new chapter with $500, at the very least. There, now you can pay for pizza, and you bring pizza. People tend to show up. That's an IT truism, right? I was once doing like monthly 1 hour classes for a company, and they measured me on the percentage of developers who showed up. So I did this meeting, and I had like 50% show up. Then I actually showed up on site and brought with me 20 pizzas and emailed everyone I had pizzas with me. Guess what percentage of developers showed up when I did that?
Yeah.
90?
130% of the developers.
I was going to say, more than
wow, that was great.
Yeah.
So we'll see the new chapter, $500, get pizza, hit the leaders list, ask for speakers, get a speaker, and you have a chapter. It's not that difficult. Have good intentions, get your seating $500, get a location donated by a local IT company, preferably, buy pizza, announce the pizza, get a speaker, announce the speaker, boom, you have an OWASP chapter meeting. There's no special handshake or money at the door. It's an open meeting. Anyone can show up, and we let the speakers. If someone the more the speaker is providing a good source of technical information, the less it's a sales pitch, the better. Our community. When our community, any of you who deal with sales, how does our tech community of security people? What do they in general think of technical salesmen? They don't treat them gently, right? So, approach these communities as someone who wants to be a technical contributor or participate in the conversation, regardless of what your day job is. And I think that's the best way to OWASP. And in my experience, when you behave that way, good things happen to you anyways.
That's a general, life application. Go be nice and bring something to the table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now you're talking.
Be nice with pizza in your hand.
That's right.
Exactly.
Go be nice. Bring pizza. Add some to the conversation.
Exactly. That's my only advice.
That's great advice.
That's right. Okay, so we're coming up against a threshold here in a few minutes. David, do you have any parting questions or thoughts?
It's just always good to talk to Jim. Thanks for coming and being on the podcast. Oh, and Jim, I used to love it when you did your podcast. Are you still doing those, or you plan to do in the future?
Mark Miller has taken over the podcast. So Mark Miller has been running the OWASP 24/7 podcast for well over a year now. Mark came to me and recently and said, Jim, I'm really grateful you let me take your podcast and blah. And I'm like, and I stopped him and said, Mark, you've been running this podcast for over a year. You have your own style, your own community. You're doing a fantastic job. This is not my podcast. This is yours. Do whatever you wish with it.
Yeah.
And so I give him. I did about 100 podcasts. I did 99, I think, and my time has come to an end. I'm moving on to other endeavors. I'm really proud of what Mark Miller has done and how he's taken that show over and done just a fantastic job with it. So go check out the OWASP 24/7 podcast hosted by Mark Miller. That's my advice.
Will
Awesome.
do. John, any parting questions or comments you want to add?
Well, I just want to say thanks to Jim. I really appreciate your enthusiasm and your expertise, and it's always great to talk to a giant in the industry. And I just want to thank you for being here today.
And I say this objectively. I've run into a lot of F5 folk, and I really feel like you guys have a lot of integrity. So it's always a pleasure to run into F5. It's always a good experience. So I wish you all a lot of success. And if you ever have an extra piece of big hardware you want to ship to my house, I can do for password cracking, I'd be happy to hold that for you. So
I thought you were going to ask for an extra big piece of pizza after our conversation. That's all I care about, Jim.
I've been
got
in
pizza if I need some F5. That's all I'm saying. Big
Yeah.
hardware.
I've been in F5 7.5 years now, and I'm still waiting for my piece of big hardware. So don't hold your breath.
Right.
So will you be at RSA?
I'm not going to be at RSA this year. I'm booked up teaching. So
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Well, we'll miss you. We'll be there, and we're looking forward to it. It'll be my first time at RSA, so I'm excited about that. And so anyway, thank you very much for taking your time to join us and talk to us about OWASP and more than OWASP, just secure coding and getting out there and getting this stuff solved.
Yeah.
Well, you're all fantastic. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so kindly for this invitation. Aloha. Take care.
Aloha.
Bye,
Great.
Jim.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Bye,
Take care.
everybody.